Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's session on underhedging and overhedging. This is primarily related to risk management in futures and options. Right. So I'm Neil Rawat. I'm a world rank 2 in AFM. I'm also an AFM tutor at AFM Advantage. So let us just start this session. I'll keep it as concise and think as possible. So in front of us, we have an example, and you can quickly go through it. So it's currently 1st May, right? On 31st August, Gogatco is due to pay 14.5 to an American supplier, receive 37.4, so on and so on. Right. We have the currency futures that have been given to us, and we have also gotten the exchange rates. The currencies in question over here are the Malaysian ringgit and the US dollar. From what I can infer straight off the bat over here is that the Malaysian ringgit is a much weaker currency because one Malaysian ringgit can only get you 0.2 XXX dollars. Right. This is the first inference. Now, right now, we are going to understand underhedging and overhedging through futures. Okay. So currently, I'm going to work through the futures transaction for this particular example, and I'll show you in both cases if you were to underhedge or overhedge, how would this entire thing play out to be? And why is underhedging and overhedging important? Underhedging and overhedging can be the difference between a fail and a pass because it can account for 1 or 2 marks in the actual calculation. Okay. So, anyways, let's get started. I've quickly noted down the um, stepwise performer, which I personally follow. So, the first step in a futures transaction is always to identify the contract currency. Okay. So, over here, the contract currency is MR. How exactly? Because the contract size clearly says ringgit 500,000. So, we have identified the contract currency, right? What is the underlying action? Okay. The underlying action over here is Gugatco is in Malaysia. So, of course, it's going to use the Malaysian ringgit, right? But before that, we have to figure out one thing, which many of you would have not caught at the moment, right? And that is the fact that Gugatco has two transactions over here in dollars. So, you won't separately sit and do them. Okay, you won't split 37.4 and 14.5 in two different transactions and do them. Please do not make the mistake of doing that. Right? Whenever we are dealing with two receipts, we'll use the concept of matching. Right? So we have a receipt over here from an American customer, and we also have a payment to an American supplier. The currencies are the same, right? We can match them together through something called the matching concept. Okay, you would have learned this in risk management, by the way, right? So matching concept basically says that we can, net the exposure if the currency is the same and it's on the same date. Okay, so it qualifies both our requirements. It's the same currency on the same date, and they're opposing transactions. The 37.4, 14.5 will net them against each other, and the only transaction, our overall exposure in the grand scheme of things, is only 22.9. So only that much amount we have to actually hedge, right? The others we don't. So now that we are clear with this, we know that 22.9 is to be received. Okay, it's receivable. So if you're going to be receiving dollars, right, our American customer is going to give us $22.9 million. We have to convert it to Malaysian ringgit, right? Because we are based in Malaysia. So we'll give these dollars to the bank, and the bank will give us Malaysian ringgit. So what are we doing exactly? We are selling dollars. Okay, we are selling dollars, and we are buying back Malaysian ringgit. So the underlying action is buying. Okay, just to solidify your basics, right? Step two, what futures expiry? So we had two futures expiry given to us, right? But the transaction is due on 31st August. So if the transaction is on 31st August, obviously we can't be choosing June. We'll have to choose a date after 31st August, which is September. So we'll be choosing September expiry options. Okay. Now, how many contracts? So first we have to identify if the CC and the receiving currency are in the same currency or are they in different currencies. So over here, in this case particularly, our currencies are opposing to each other. So our contract currency is in ringgit, but our receiving currency is in dollars. So that means we'll have to convert one of the currencies to the other, right? In some cases, the contract currency and the receiving currency is the same, so we don't have to do anything. We can simply just take the amount and divide it by the number of contracts. But over here, since they are in opposing currencies, we have to convert dollar into MR at the futures rate of today. Okay. Don't take the spot rate. Do not take any other futures rate. Please take the futures rate of today at the opening of the transaction. Okay. And that is 0.2378. Okay. So 22.9, I'll have to convert $22.9 million. I'll have to convert into Malaysian ringgit because my contract currency itself is Malaysian ringgit, right? So I have to convert the amount into MR. So 22.9 divided by 0.2378. Why am I dividing? Because it's obviously that the US dollars is the stronger currency over here. So less US dollars will equal to more Malaysian ringgit. And this is the only way we are getting more Malaysian ringgit. This is the small logical clauses I give my students. So they kind of latch on to the formula very easily, right? So think of it in that way when we are converting currencies, because many people get confused. They end up multiplying, they end up dividing by something else altogether. So this is the logic you have to use. Okay, that is why I emphasize that as the first thing. So when we get this amount, we have to divide this by 500,000 because one contract size is 500,000, and that will give us the number of contracts. Now, the number of contracts will return as a decimal number. Now, either at this point, we can round it up to 193 or we can round it down to 192, right? And that is how we will get at underhedging or overhedging, which I will discuss down below. Now, step 4 is calculate the basis. We need to find out the basis because we'll be using lock-in rate for this um, question, right? Obviously, we don't have a closing futures price anywhere visible anywhere, so we have to use a lock-in rate, right? So our current basis is spot rate minus futures rate, right? I've calculated that, right? 0.2358, right? Minus 0.2378, right? I've calculated it. Then we can simply just piece it together, right? So May to September is 5 months, May to August is 4 months. So the months of unexpired basis, right? What is basis? Basis basically reduces linearly, right? And at the end of the futures cycle and at the spot rate, the difference between both of them will be zero. So we are assuming that the basis will be reducing linearly to zero, right? That is the um, underlying logic behind it, right? So this will give us our months of unexpired basis, right? And then we can simply use this formula, current basis into months of unexpired basis, uh, into months divided by months to expiry, and that will give us our unexpired basis. Why are we finding out the unexpired basis? Because for lock-in rate, we'll need the opening futures price and the unexpired basis. So we need to find out the unexpired basis. We have found that out, and we can get a lock-in rate, right? Now, many people will make the mistake over here in the books, right? In the kits, it has been specified that now you don't have to do anything, right? Many people I've seen they don't do anything past this point. They'll take the lock-in rate and they'll assume it as the final rate of conversion, which is 0.237 dollars per one MR, and then they'll find out the final transaction, right? And please do not do this in the exam because this will guarantee that you'll lose 1 or 2 marks, right? Whatever the marks have been allotted to underhedging or and overhedging, they will be lost, right? So do not just end it over here. The logical rationale behind this is that your futures contracts cannot be in decimals, right? This will only be true if this was a whole number in the first place, right? Then you could have simply just gone with this step and that would be the end of this problem. But over here, this is given in decimals, right? So this is a case of either underhedging or overhedging, depending on what we choose. So if we round it up, which is case one, if we round it up to 193, we are over hedging. How are we over hedging? Think of it in this way. We are receiving something, right? And in that receiving, we were getting 192.5 of something something, right? But now that we have rounded it up to 193, That means the amount which we will receive is in a way more, right? Because 192.6 is a lesser number compared to 193, right? And we are receiving. So that means we have overhedged the receipt, right? Because we have declared that we are going to be taking 193 contracts instead of what it originally was, right? So this is a classic case of overhedging, right? So what is the formula for this? For overhedging, it's pretty simple. Value of one contract into number of contracts, because that will give you the amount you have hedged through futures in Malaysian ringgit, multiplied by the lock-in rate. Okay, multiplied by the lock-in rate. Do not forget this, right? And then you would take away the actual exposure, right? What is the actual exposure? 22.9. $22.9 million, right? My bad. $22.9 million, right? And then after that, you have to settle the transaction. Okay. You have to settle the transaction. Now, what will you use to settle the transaction? Now, the thing is, this is the amount which we have overhedged, right? So we have to settle this contract 4 months down the line. At what rate? And that's a good question. We'll be using the forward rate. Okay. So whenever we are dealing with overhedging or underhedging, we'll be using the forward rate, because that is when uh, the overhedged and underhedged amount will be completed, right? So 9100 divided by 0.2370 as the payable. Okay. Now, why are we dividing by 0.237 instead of 0.2374? Reason being, this is a payment, right? And we are always at the disadvantage. Always remember this, we are at the disadvantage, so we always have to pay the most. Okay. You have to either pay the most or receive the least, right? Keep this logic in your head, and that is why I've used 0.237 instead of 0.2374. Okay. And this will give us the forward rate in MR, right? The transaction which is going to be settled. And now we can simply move on to the final transaction. For this, I've simply taken the amount we have hedged, which is 500,000 Malaysian ringgit into 193, which will give us the futures, right? And then I've simply taken the overexposure. Okay. The overexposure was given to us in Malaysian ringgit. You simply take it away because it's a payment, right? We have overhead. So this will give us a total net of 90, yes, 96 million Malaysian ringgit, right? Now in case two, if we had chosen to round it down, now instead of receiving more, we are choosing to receive less, or basically hedge less in better language, which is basically 192 contracts. So in this, it will just simply flip the formula. Okay. It's actual exposure minus value of one contract into number of contracts into lock-in rate, right? And this will give us $109,600, right? And then we settle the transaction at the forward rate, but this time instead of using 0.237, we'll be using 0.2374, because we have to receive the least. I told you, either we pay the most or we receive the least. We are always at a disadvantage. So 0.2374 will give us the least amount of receivable, right? Now, simply just final transaction. So final transaction again is 500,000 into 192, right? Because we had taken 192 contracts. Overexposure is this, and we add it up and we get this. So you would see, right? Um, they are pretty close, right? They're pretty close. There will be some differences, but the entire point is that this is how you would proceed with this question. Okay. Do not take this route. Okay. You'll usually end up losing the 1 mark or 2 mark, which is allocated for either under hedging or over hedging, whichever way you go. Okay. So depending on you, you can choose whatever you're comfortable with, right? If you're comfortable with over hedging it and you feel over hedging makes the most sense to you, go with that. If you feel under hedging is the best way to go with it, do it, right? It's your choice, it's your discretion over here, right? And yes, whenever you get a decimal as a contract, do not take the direct route and end it over here, right? You end it over here, you lose marks again. Just repeating. right? So, of course, if this was a whole number and you ended it over here, right? Because then there would be no case of underhedging and overhedging, right? You don't have to round it up or round it down. It's the exact number of contracts. So you wouldn't need to do any of this. This would be the end of the story, right? So I hope this, you know, cleared the basics of overhedging and underhedging for you, right? And I hope your basics for futures also got clear, right? So again, if you're looking for, you know, structured guidance or, a structured learning procedure and basically a helping hand, I would say, right? You can check out my website, AFM Advantage. I offer courses over there, right? And I will still be uploading a lot of conceptual videos on YouTube like these, right? The one which I've just uploaded right now. So yeah, just subscribe, like the video, right? Tell me what you would want me to cover next on YouTube in the comment section below. And yeah, have a great day forward, right? Thank you so much for watching. I'm signing out.